Hello everybody, welcome to episode 157 of Show Viewer. Today we'll be going over the Magic Knight's entrance arc of Black Clover. Now, I recently just got into Black Clover because I did finish up the Hunter x Hunter manga, which I really enjoyed, but I'm not going to make a video on the Secession arc yet because it's not completed yet, so I'm going to wait till it finishes out, if it ever does, and then make a video on it then. But yeah, so the Magic Knight's entrance arc. So we start off with, I'm reading the manga. Like I said, I'm not watching the anime because the manga is completed. So, reading the manga, and we start off getting introduced to Yuno and Asta. Now, Yuno is a very magically talented, taller young boy, but he grew up with Asta. They grew up in the rundown village of Hage, or Hage. I don't really know how it's pronounced. It's Hage, because, like, it is Japanese, so I want to say, like Kage, but then you have, like, Mage. So it might be Hage. I don't really know. So like I said, I haven't watched the anime. But yeah, so they grew up in this village. They were both orphans who were found at the church here at a very young age, and they were raised here and all of that. And we see that Asta has absolutely no talent for magic, but Yuno is very talented with magic. And we see as Asta, due to this, has tried to compensate throughout his lives by increasing his physical abilities drastically, far beyond what should be capable for a 15-year-old boy, because both Yuno and Asta are 15-year-old boys. And so we kind of see all this. We introduce them. We see that Asta is enamored with the sister or the nun of the village, and she will not take him on because she's a nun. But yeah, so we see this, and then ultimately we see as it kind of progresses along until we get introduced to the idea of grimoires. Now, grimoire, Grimoire, as I'm going to say grimoire, but they are essentially books that allow you to perform more advanced magic, and the more you become attuned to your magic, the more pages your grimoire actually gets, so you can perform even more advanced magic. So we see as at the age of 15, everyone goes to acquire a grimoire, and not everyone is, I guess, really guaranteed a grimoire, because not everyone has the right, I guess, aspects to be picked by grimoire, and then you can always try the next year after training and all of that. So we see as everyone goes in, everyone starts getting grimoires, and they start flying off the shelves and all of that. And we actually see that Yuno gets the 4 Clover grimoire. So, in this world, we have the Wizard King. Now, the Wizard King was an entity that essentially saved the world, and has now become a title has been passed down based upon who has enough merit to be the Wizard King. And we see that, in fact, Asta and Yuno's goals, which they agreed to at a very young age, is to become the Wizard King. And so, we see that at the moment, the Wizard King, we actually don't get to see him until, the 10th chapter, so the final chapter of this arc. But yeah, so, there is a Wizard King at the moment, very powerful man, obviously, and that's just kind of like the position of Wizard King. It's the most powerful wizard across the lands, or mage across the lands. But yeah, so we see this, and ultimately, Yuno ends up getting his grimoire. And it is the 4 Clover grimoire, the 4-leaf Clover grimoire, which was the one which was originally bestowed upon the original Wizard King. So this is said to be a good omen and prove that Yuno has a chance of actually becoming the Wizard King. And then we see as all of them start flying out and all that, and Asta ultimately does not end up getting one. So he's obviously very disappointed by this, and we see as he walks out, and ultimately as Yuno and Asta are walking out, they get, ambushed by this disgraced Magic Knight by the name of Revchi. And he ends up attacking them with chain magic and all of that. And ultimately, Asta ends up getting captured. And during this time, we see Asta getting really down on himself because of what Revchi said and him not getting a grimoire. But then suddenly, a grimoire flies out. Asta ends up using it, draws a blade from it, and is able to beat Revchi. And with this grimoire, we see that he is a blackened 5-leaf Clover grimoire. It is very, tattered and torn, but it is a grimoire, so Asta is very proud of it. And this seems to have some type of omen, as we learn in the second chapter. Yeah, so the second chapter predominantly focuses on the actual Magic Knight's entrance exam. So we see as they all end up going there, and we get introduced to these anti-birds, which, hound on people who have lower magical abilities. And, of course, they are absolutely hounding on Asta, because Asta, in fact, has no magic. And they're just getting all over him and all that. And we see the first couple of tests. We actually get introduced to some of the Magic Knights. We see that the one who is the highest member of the, most elite Magic Knight Corps is, his name's William something. And we also get to introduce to Yami is the leader of the Black Bulls, which is the weakest or the least renowned group within the Magic Knights, because they're individual, teams, and each, team has their own merit and stuff like that. Yeah, so as we get introduced to Yami, because Yami actually ends up, having an encounter with Asta, and Asta doesn't really realize that he is a captain of one of the Magic Knights teams. And so we see as he kind of disrespects him, and then obviously Yami gets a little disgruntled about this. But yeah, so then we see as the Magic Knights exams start, and we see the first one, which is to try and fly on a broomstick, which Asta cannot do at all because he has no magic. Then we see a couple other things, really just conjuring magic. And then we ultimately get to the big thing, which is the combat trial. So we see as everyone prepares for the combat, and throughout this dude by the name of Seke, that's all. I'm gonna say Seke because it's Sekke, and he has been helping Asta throughout, but he's really just been abusing Asta's, I guess, inability to perform magic to make exemplify himself and make him look better. But yeah, so after this, we see as Seke's like, you know what, I'll fight Asta, because no one really wanted to fight Asta because it'd just be beating up on, it'd be beating a dead horse essentially. But Seke ends up greatly, underestimating Asta, because we see as he even vocalizes to Asta, and this makes Asta really mad. So he ends up whipping out his grimoire and one-shotting Seke. And then after that, we see as selections are made, and ultimately Yuno ends up getting sent to the Golden Dawn team, which is the one with the most merit because he performed very well. And we get to see that Asta is in fact put on the Black Bulls because no one was actually going to pick him at first. But then Yami hops down, speaks with him, and he's like, yeah, you ain't got nothing. You must not dream to be the Wizard King, but if you're going to, dream and do as hard as you can. And with the Black Bulls, I'll let you do that. I'll let you push and go beyond your limits. So you will not be anything less than beyond your limits on the Black Bulls. So we see then Asta ends up joining this team, and Seke does also end up getting picked, but it's not by a very highly regarded team. Yeah, we see also as Seke attempts to attack Asta on the crapper after the selection, and obviously he's thwarted. Well, not obviously, but he's ultimately thwarted by Yuno, who's like, "Yo, don't be messing with my essentially my brother." But yeah, so then we see as Asta ends up going along and getting introduced to the Black Bulls. We see they're in this big rundown castle. And we get introduced to a couple of some of the ones that are more renowned are Noelle, who we don't actually get introduced to at first. We get introduced to Magna. We also get introduced to Luck, and obviously Yami, Vanessa, and there's one that loves eating food, and there's one who's obsessed with his sister. Not in a weird way. He just really loves his sister in a normal family relationship way. But yeah, so we see all this, and then ultimately they kind of start talking and everything, and then ultimately Magna ends up telling Asta about this baptism thing. So we see as Asta ends up agreeing to the baptism, where Magna's like, all right, you're going to have to essentially beat my magic. So he ends up sending him a massive fireball at him, and Asta's like, I can't stop this. I'm going to die if I try and split this magic and cut it through with my blade. So what he ends up doing is he ends up, flipping his sword to the side with the brunt of the sword and reflecting it back at Magna. Holy smokes, I'm losing my ability to speak. And this obviously does some damage to Magna, but he is impressed by this. And everyone kind of starts to accept Asta after this, even though he's still kind of a little bit of a rowdy kid almost. But he's just really enamored with the situation he finds himself in. But yeah, so after this, we get introduced to the character of Noelle. Noelle is a member of the royal family, actually, but she was kind of disgraced because she can't control her magic, and she is one of the weaker ones among the royal family, though she still has immense mana and magical capabilities. Yeah, we see is we end up going to the first night that Asta's there, and she is having difficulty controlling her magic. And we see she's outside getting down on herself because she can't do this, and then ultimately she kind of just gets so angry that it ends up controlling her and lifting her up in the sky, and she goes into a fugue state almost. And then we see as everyone goes out there, and ultimately Yami's like, yo, we need someone to break her out of that magic. And he's like, you know what, Asta, you have magic nullifying ability, so I'm going to throw you. And he throws Asta up there, and he ends up slicing it and then saving Noelle. And he speaks with Noelle, and obviously through this interaction, because he's very endearing to her, and he's like, yo, you have that much power with your magic? I'm very impressed. I have no magic. And they kind of become friends off this. But yeah, so as time progresses, we get to know a little bit more about the Black Bulls and everything, and obviously Asta gets his cloak, which is really cool. And then I guess I'll kind of talk more about the first mission that Asta undergoes. So the first mission, we have Magna, Noelle, and Asta on it, and they have been sent to a village that has been enshrouded in fog, and they end up going here, and ultimately they're like, yo, Asta, end up just destroy all this fog. And Asta's like, I can't do that. And he's like, yeah, fog, this is obviously a magical fog. Well, Magna tells him this, because we see as Magna and Asta kind of become close buds so far. And ultimately, we see as Asta ends up clearing out the fog with his grimoire, and we see as they end up going into town, when they notice that everyone has been captured by these mages. And obviously, these mages are very powerful, and it has led to the death of this one old granddad dude. And we see then as they start to engage in combat, our Magic Knights, the Black Bulls, start to engage with these unknown mages. And we see as everything's going pretty well, but ultimately, Asta is unable to really do anything against the main head, like, captain dude, whose name is Heath. And we also see as, like, other attempts to do anything are really failing. We see as Magna can't really get through him, Asta can't get through him, and it appears that it's hopeless. We do see, though, as Noelle actually effectively uses her abilities after being under immense mental duress, because she's, like, freaking out that these people are going to die, and Magna and Asta went ahead and told her, yo, run off, you can't control it, there's no point in you dying here. And she ends up getting her, like, not really, like, kind of bougie idea in her head, as she displayed prior on in the arc, of she's nobility, so she's above commoners. And so we see as she starts to run off, but then a little girl gets on her and she's like, please don't leave us, Miss Mage, help us, help us. And so ultimately we see as Noelle is actually able to control her magic here, and she ends up enshrouding everyone in, like, these water bubbles, because she has, like, kind of water magic. So we see this, and we see as Asta and Magna are trying to figure out how to beat Heath, because Heath uses ice magic, and even with Magna having the superior magic, since the type advantage, like Pokemon, but since he has this, we expect Magna to be able to do good, but he's actually not. He's doing very poorly against Heath. However, he ends up coming with an idea. So what he does is he ends up casting a bunch of magic down at Heath. And Heath obviously deflects all this and blocks it, and he's like, was that your best idea? And Asta actually then pulls up behind Heath and reflects the magic into Heath's back, which then leads to his defeat. That was a very smart tactic there. I was not expecting that, and that was a phenomenal play by Magna and Asta. So we end up seeing as Heath is defeated, and he had, like, some charm on him or something like that, which was apparently very valuable. And we see then as he uses, like, this self-destruct thing, which covers him all in ice and ultimately leads to his death. But yeah, then after that we see the aftermath. Everyone's really happy. We actually end up seeing as this anti-magic bird that has stayed with Asta, who eventually becomes named Nero, so I'm just gonna call him Nero. Nero ends up going and grabbing a, like, gem from one of the local churches, and he ends up hitting Asta with, and Asta's like, yo, what are you doing? And ultimately the villagers are like, you know what, yeah, he grabbed it, he went and he got it for you, so yeah, you can have it, but since you protected our entire village. Yeah, so then after it progresses along a little bit, we see as the Black Bulls are preparing to leave, but they ultimately end up running into the grandchild of the granddad dude who had died. And here the grandkid reveals how his granddad had high aspirations to be possibly a Magic Knight in the Wizard King someday. However, he never achieved it because he never pushed himself hard enough. And the kid's speaking, he's like, yeah, I want to do that, but I don't know if I can. Then Asta's like, you know what, you do that. And you become a Magic Knight one day, because it's not too hard, because I have 0 magic and I was able to do it. So you become a Magic Knight one day, and you become even better than me. You come to become the Wizard King. But you're going to have to try very hard, because I'm going to be trying my hardest then as I am now. Which will be even more benefit, because I'll be even more powerful then. But yeah, so then after that, we see as they end up going back to the HQ of the Black Bulls, where we see as Yami ends up dishing out the wages for the month. And this leads to them then going to the market. It's Vanessa, Magna. Is it Magna? No, it's Vanessa, Noelle, and Asta. And yeah, Magna does because he goes gambling. But those 4 end up going to town. It's called, like, Kika or something like that. It's in the, like, closer to the noble portion of the, like, kingdom that Black Clover happens in, because you have the Forsaken realm, you have the Commoner realm, and then the Noble realm. And obviously, those are quite self-explanatory. The Forsaken realm is obviously, like, the peasants, the lowest of the low, Commoners, just, like, middling people. And then you have the Noble realm, which is obviously for the nobles. So they end up going to, I believe it's called Kika. It might be called Kike, I don't know. But yeah, so they end up going to this town where we see is everything's getting displayed. Obviously, Asta's very overwhelmed because he comes from this backwater village. He's like, whoa, they got all this stuff, and it's very just basic stuff for the average people there. But yeah, so we see as this plays out, and then ultimately they end up going to a gambling den where we end up running in with Seke again, and Seke has been gambling with this old woman, but he ultimately ends up losing. But then he ends up getting in contact with Asta, and he sees Vanessa and Noelle with him. He's obviously like, what the heck are these women doing with Asta? And they kind of have a brief encounter and all of that. And obviously Noelle and Vanessa are not impressed by Seke, because, I mean, he's not really an impressive dude. But yeah. And then we see as the old woman that was playing with Seke, her winnings end up getting robbed. So we see if this thief runs off, then Asa obviously starts sprinting after him, and we see Seke also pursues him on like this bronze bike that he made, because Seke can make stuff out of bronze. That's kind of how his magic works. But yeah, so we see as Asa ends up pursuing him, and he is able to ultimately slash this dude. Like he was like running on some fire or something like that, kind of like Kilala from Inuyasha. And we see as he's able to slice the flames, but ultimately the dude is still able to go ahead. But then we see as Seke comes in and runs him over with this bike thing that he made with his bronze. And this leads to the man ultimately getting downed and him dropping his earnings. Well, not his earnings, but his plunder, his bounty. And during this time, though, we see as he actually slashes Seke with like a paralyzing drug, and Seke lays there. He presumes that he's going to die. But we also ultimately see as Vanessa pulls up, puts an ointment on it, and she's like, that's a very basic poison. You're not going to die. You'll be fine. And then we see as Asta ends up picking up the earnings and returning them to the old woman. And everything seems to be fine. Then we see as everyone leaves. And then this old woman ends up turning into the Wizard King. The Wizard King had disguised himself as this old woman in some gambling den because he just wanted to go out and explore the commoner realm and do whatever he wanted to do. And we see that, in fact, due to what Asta did here, his impression of Asta has grown drastically. And he wants to know more about Asta because he believes that Asta has much potential, especially due to the, I guess, mystery behind his grimoire. But yeah, that's more for another arc, because we do actually see that the Wizard King begins ultimately suggest Asta specifically for a mission that comes up next. I've already read 2 more chapters in, so I'm at chapter 12. But yeah, that's all there really was for the Magic Knight entrance entrance arc of Black Clover. I really enjoyed it, and I will certainly be sticking with Black Clover even longer, because I love the character type that Asta is, because he's kind of like Toji from JJK or Rock Lee from Naruto, because he's not partaking in the power system of this world. He has to become physically a beast to even compete with the people in this world, which I love that archetype of character, and I cannot wait to see more of how Asta improves and how Asta keeps up with the increasing demands of this magical world that he's been thrown into. Well, not thrown into, he's always lived in it, but this world of magical knights that he's been thrown into, more or less. But yeah, I cannot wait to see what more I get from Black Clover. I think there's 389 chapters, got a good solid 377 left, but I do not believe that's going to be discouraging at all, because I'm really enjoying it so far, and I cannot wait to read more. So yeah, whenever I get into the next arc, there'll be a video on that. So yeah, thank you very much for watching episode 157 of Shelf Review.